Over the years, our kids have had a lot of illnesses. 6 kids means a lot of childhood sniffles and coughs. And when our kids weren't feeling well, it affected our entire home. Luckily, some clever guys in Brisbane have come up with the perfect solution: Rehydrate.
Rehydrate are delicious drinks that rehydrate up to 3 times faster than water alone, packed with essential electrolytes. Rehydrate is one of the few rehydration products that is safe for all ages. Stock up at Coles and be prepared whenever illness strikes.
It's often tweens we're looking at, right? Who are starting to get into social media, which adds this additional mirror, right? You had the mirror in your head, and now you have the mirror on your phone, where you're taking selfies and you're looking at yourself constantly, and you're editing them, and you're scrolling through hundreds, thousands of images a day of other people, right? So that's just really turning up the focus on appearance. So that's the first sort of challenge that girls are running into at this age.
This is the Parenting in Perspective podcast. It's a happy families podcast. Hello, my name is Dr. Justin Coulson, dad to 6 daughters, author of 6 books about raising happy families. And when I began researching for my book, Misconnection, it became pretty clear very quickly that body image was an enormous issue for tween and teen girls. In fact, for women generally. The anxiety that body image causes our daughters is a byproduct of the world we live in, where women are judged on their appearance in a way that men simply don't experience. Well, my guest today is Dr. Renee Engeln. She's the author of one of my favourite books, Beauty Sick: How the Cultural Obsession with Appearance Hurts Girls and Women. Dr. Engeln is a professor of psychology at Northwestern University in Illinois, where she directs the Body and Media Lab. Renee's work has been published in numerous academic journals, and she's a regular contributor to the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, and the Huffington Post. Her TEDx talk from the University of Connecticut has racked up almost 700,000 views on YouTube. So when you finish this podcast, look up that one as well. It's so worth watching, and make sure you grab a copy of Beauty Sick: How the Cultural Obsession with Appearance Hurts Girls and Women. It's a fabulous book. When it comes to psychology and how girls and women view their physical appearance, I don't think that there's anyone more qualified than Professor Renee Engeln. And as usual, I began by asking her what work and family life looks like for her.
Well, let's see. I'm a psychologist, I'm a body image researcher, and I'm a professor at Northwestern University, which is in Evanston, Illinois, which is just north of Chicago, Illinois. And what else am I? I'm an aunt to a wonderful niece and nephew who came along kind of later in my life. And that has been an absolute joy. They are 4 and almost 2.
Oh, right? So they're really little. They're
little. Yeah, they're little. And I have to say, this is going to be a horrible thing to say on a podcast focused on parenting, but I've never really liked babies. I find them kind of terrifying and sticky, and they don't hold their heads up, and they've always been scary. And when I knew my brother was, he and his wife were having children, I thought, what if I don't love them? But no, I do. I love them more than I thought it was possible to love. So it's been full of joy, and also just interesting for me to learn how to connect with these little people that have been such a good part of my life. Yeah,
I'm totally with you on the floppy neck thing. That really bothers me. But for some reason, especially when they're your blood. I mean, babies generally, you see them and they are, but when they're blood, when they're related to you, there's something that happens, isn't there?
Everyone said it would feel different, and I didn't believe them. But there's something powerful there, that they're an extension of my brother, whom I love so much. And I've always been teased. I like tweens and teenagers. So about the time that children really start to drive their parents crazy, I'm always like, send them to me. I got them. Like I really like that. I like their anger and their intensity and all of that.
So you can say that you can say that because you're not the mum, right? The mums are like, and you're like, no, I'll be the cool auntie. Yeah. This will be fun. Yeah.
You send them to me. I have a number of friends who say, will you talk to my daughter? And I'll be like, oh yeah, send her.
Yeah. Game on.
We'll talk about how terrible you are. Yeah.
Well, Renee, we're going to cover in this conversation body image because that's your area. This is your absolute fascination. And we're going to talk about how it affects the youngest children right through to tweens, teens, and even adults. The mums and dads who are participating in this conversation and listening to what we have to say. So a little over a year ago, I read a book that it absolutely captured me. I wrote it on my list. I keep a spreadsheet of all the books that I read each year. I'm a little bit, it's just because my bookshelf's kind of full of books, and sometimes I forget which ones that I loved and which ones I didn't, or what was in them. And so I've got this spreadsheet where I title, author, what did I give it out of 5, and a bit of a spiel about how I enjoyed the book. I'm so glad you think that's funny. So anyway,
I do. I'm getting a live book review in the nerdiest way ever. I like it. I like it.
This is who I am. Your book was a 5-star book. It was pretty much my book of the year. I think that one and a book by Todd Rose from Harvard called The End of Average was that were my 2 books of I think it was 2018. I just loved Beauty Sick, which is the name of your book, Beauty Sick. And I gained a sense of perspective that I just can't describe. So I'm a male. I've never had the kinds of questions about my body that you describe women experiencing. Now, I haven't told you something about me as well, and that is that my wife, Kylie, and I are the parents of 6 daughters.
Oh, what are their age ranges?
Our eldest has moved out. She's married. She's in her early 20s. And then we've got one who is finishing her senior year of high school. She's about to be 18. We've got one who's 16 in grade 10. And then we've got one in grade 7, one in grade 5. And our baby is in her first year of school.
Wow.
So all girls. So as I was reading your book, I saw things in a new light. I just didn't know that females felt the way you described when it comes to their bodies and the pressure that they feel around their bodies. Even with my wife, I had never saw that. Now, what's really interesting about that is when I first went on a date with her, I think it was pretty much our first proper date, we walked into a chicken and chip shop. You don't really have them so much in the United States, I've found, where you buy the barbecue chicken and a whole lot of hot, you call them fries, we call them chips. We've got these places everywhere. We call them things like charcoal chicken. And so you go in and you order your chicken, your chips and your salad, or your chicken, fries and salad, and it's all really fresh and go out and sit on the beach and eat it or whatever it might be. So I've walked in and I've ordered a chicken and a couple of dollars worth of chips. And then I looked at Kylie and I said, what are you going to order? And she thought that was funny because she thought I was going to share my chicken and chips with her. And I was like, no, I'm eating the chicken and the chips. What are you going to order? And she said for the first time in her life, she was able to relax on a date because she could see that I didn't care what she ate because she was never going to be able to eat even close to what I ate. In fact, she said it was the first time she'd been on a date where she ate more than a little bit of salad.
Mm-hmm. I'll just have a salad, right? So many women, they go home hungry and then they eat in private afterward. Yeah.
And your book kind of opened up this world of what it must be like to be female and to be worried about body all the time. Now, as it happened, as I was reading your book, I was writing a book about teen girls and it influenced the questions that I asked them and the way that I was able to write about their answers. And I found it just so helpful and so extraordinary. But in the introduction of your book, you state, and I quote, "So many young women today are strikingly bold in important areas of their lives, but still crumble in front of the mirror. They fight so hard to be treated with respect, but seem, at least at times, to be willing to trade it all in an instant if they could only remake their physical appearance." And then you give an answer to the question of why that is. And this is an image, for want of a better word, or maybe it's the perfect word, that really sticks throughout the entire book. You say, quote, "We may no longer play dress-ups and pose in front of the mirror the way young girls do, but I worry that's only because we've internalized that mirror. We never actually left it behind." I mean, that is so powerful. Can you talk about this idea that the mirror is on the inside?
Yeah, this is a big paradox that I think a lot of people are not sure how to wrestle with, because in many ways we've been sold a bill of goods, right? We've got these generations of young women who are like, I can do anything and I can be anything. And what we've seen is a co-optation of that sense of power to sell them on beauty products and diet plans and tutorials and this world that is completely obsessed with how they look. And we've sold it as empowering, right? Which is insane. And what happens is that we've gone from having a culture that's always looking at women, that's always commenting on how they look. We've gone from that coming from the outside to a point where we've internalized it and we do that to ourselves. So I try to stay away from academic jargon, but the there's a term that I always need to use, even though it's jargon, which is self-objectification, right? So the idea is if the world treats you like an object long enough and with enough intensity, that eventually you see yourself that way, right? You don't need to be looking in the mirror because it's in your head. And so you're always monitoring how you look. You're always aware. It's distracting. It's distressing, right? It crops up in inopportune times. It keeps you from living the life that's more consistent with your values. So that's what I mean when I say beauty sick, is that you've got that mirror stuck in your head and it's causing you trouble. And it's not your fault. That's always the thing I want to say. This is not something wrong with individual girls and women. It's something wrong with our culture.
Well, let's start with the culture. In fact, no, we might come to the cultural stuff in just a few seconds. I want to talk about this beauty sickness first of all. Let's talk about young children, young girls, because when I was reading in Beauty Sick, you set the stage by starting with the youngest of our children, let's say around age 5, and you cite some research that talks about how 5-year-olds feel about their bodies, 5-year-old girls.
There's a pretty large survey found that about 35% of 5-year-old girls are already saying that they at least sometimes engage in dietary restraint. Now, I want to be clear that 5-year-olds don't understand what dieting actually is. Right. So when a 5-year-old tells you that she's dieting, what she's telling you is that she's already learned that this is what women do. Right. That this is part of being a grown up. This is something you think about. All of these young girls are already telling us, close to a third, saying that they're comparing their bodies to women and girls they see in cartoons and movies and television programs, right? So they're at this really young age where they're just learning to use their bodies. I'm not a developmental psychologist by training. I focus mostly on teenagers and adults. I'm not super expert about young children. And so when I started writing this book, I actually just did some basic research on the developmental stages for children. And one of the things that really threw me, and I write about this in the book, is I asked, what are 5-year-olds supposed to be doing? Like what marks like where a 5-year-old is. And one of the things that was listed was learning how to properly use utensils, a spoon and fork. And I thought, these are kids that don't even necessarily know how to use a fork particularly well, and they're already worried about dieting.
Yeah, they can't tie up their shoelace. They
haven't even gotten great at getting the food into their mouth yet, and they're already trying to keep it out.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking, right? It suggests that what's happening is that a lot of families are transmitting values to their young daughters that they don't mean to transmit, right? I think that's a lot of what's happening.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you've said there at the end, that parents are well-intentioned and they don't even know very often that these values are being passed on to the next generation from that tiny, tiny age. I wonder how much of it is children actually being unhappy with their bodies versus just doing what they're seeing happen in the environment. Mum's always talking about the diet, or dad's always talking about the diet, and so therefore I'm supposed to be on a diet. I don't even know what a diet is, but I remember when my little ones, and in fact, I've got some video footage of my sisters. I've got twin sisters who are a few years younger than me, and I've got some really great footage of them at about the age of 4 or 5, and they're running around the swimming pool. And the way I describe it is they're running around. They're not wearing any tops because they're only 4 or 5. You know, they're little. They've got their little bikini bottoms on, or their little swimwear bottoms on, and they've got what I would only describe as sticky outy tummies. Because you know how little kids, they've got the sticky outy tummy, and they're completely uninterested in what they look like because they're so absorbed in the moment. They're so caught up in it, and I kind of think, isn't that what it's supposed to be?
Yeah, my 4-year-old niece loves to show me. We talk only on FaceTime now because we are still locked down due to COVID, but she loves to lift up her shirt and show me her stomach, right? And kind of like grab it and move it around. And I get kind of sad already for the day that she's ashamed of her stomach. And you might think, oh, that day won't necessarily come. And I think, yeah, it will. Right. We haven't really found a way to prevent that for our girls yet. It may not be all the time, and it may not be that bad, but you can bet there's a really good shot that she's going to become a tween, probably, maybe not until a teen, who doesn't like her stomach anymore. And so that joy she has in her body now, I wish she could keep it longer. I think it's it's amazing. It's important too in learning how to use your body without fear, right? And in learning how to really inhabit your body as a doing thing instead of as an object. But even parents who mean well are already tamping this down in young girls, that sort of bodily joy.
How?
So partially with comments, right? When we say things like sit like a lady, partially, and this is my big beef lately, by dressing girls in clothing that doesn't allow them to move. This is a thing parents do, and I don't think it comes from poor intentions at all, right? But there's this temptation to put girls in dresses and tights and things that make it really hard to crawl and jump, or things where you're more likely to tell them to be careful not to get dirty, to sit nicely.
So Renee, just on that, there's a movement increasing in Australia. So we, unlike America, almost all of our schools insist that children wear a school uniform to school. Mm-hmm. But what typically happens is that the boys are wearing a shirt and shorts. The girls will, in many cases, be wearing a dress, or they'll be wearing a skirt, or they'll be wearing some item of clothing that makes movement a little bit more restrictive. Mm-hmm. If they want to be, I feel uncomfortable even saying the word now that we're having this conversation. I was going to say if they want to be more boisterous, but let's change that to if they want to be more active. It's very, very challenging for them to do that in a way that would conserve a sense of modesty, because they're wearing dresses and they don't want to be flashing their undies or their backside to everybody.
Right.
And so we've had this conversation building in Australia over the last year to maybe even 3 years, where schools are now starting to recognise that perhaps it's okay for girls to wear whatever they want, including comfortable shorts, so long as it's within the school uniform setup.
Right. And why wouldn't it be okay, right? The fact that we have to have that conversation.
But so many are still saying, no, it's not okay. This is our uniform and this is how we want our girls to be. We want them to be demure and ladylike. Can you be ladylike and wear shorts? That's my question. I mean, I think you can.
What does ladylike mean? I mean, ladylike means like a lady, and there are all kinds of ladies out there.
Yeah.
So I find that whole phrase really problematic, because what you're teaching your girls when you say that is stay small. Right? Don't take up space. Don't move. Don't learn to use your body. Don't stretch it. Don't trust it. Instead, from the beginning, think of your body in terms of how it looks to other people. Does it look appropriate? Does it look modest? If you want them to look modest, then put them in shorts so they can move however they want, right? And when you look at infants, I guess when they're a little older, they start to crawl. It's actually quite hard for a lot of babies to crawl in skirts and dresses, right? And even that is something we don't think about. I mean, just imagine it. Imagine now trying to crawl in a dress versus a pair of pants or a pair of shorts, right? So how we dress girls in such a way that requires constant fussing and monitoring, it has a real impact on how they grow up to feel about their bodies.
I want to come back to
saying your body's for other people. Right?
Yeah. Let's go back to the conversation about children. Okay, so we started with 5-year-olds and how a third of them, or just over a third of them, females. I'm guessing it wasn't the males that wanted to change their bodies, by the way. It was just the females that were talking about the diet. No. What happens as they get older? Can you talk me through the next sort of 10 to 12 years from age 5 through to age 17, 18?
So I'd say there's two big changes, right, that happen. One is the introduction to social media. Now, when that happens depends on the kind of choices parents make and what's going on with peers and things like that. But it's often tweens we're looking at, right, who are starting to get into social media, which adds this additional mirror, right? You had the mirror in your head, and now you have the mirror on your phone, where you're taking selfies and you're looking at yourself constantly and you're editing them and you're scrolling through hundreds, thousands of images a day of other people, right? So that's just really turning up the focus on appearance. So that's the first sort of challenge that girls are running into at this age. And then puberty hits, right? And the research around puberty is so clear that it tends to make boys like their bodies more, right? It brings boys' bodies more in line with the ideal. Tends to make them more muscular, broaden their shoulders, get taller, things like that. But with girls, because puberty tends to increase the amount of body fat you have, despite the fact that puberty is a sign of them physically becoming adult women, it actually is moving them farther from the body ideal for women. And there's something really sort of twisted and wrong about that. But this is the time that we see a lot of girls start to have very, very significant struggles with body image, some of which can turn into eating disorders at this age. And I think one of the most important findings for me that's come out of the clinical psychology literature is it's a study that was trying to understand why it is that we see the gender gap in depression show up in this sort of early adolescent place. Until that point, both girls and boys get depressed at about the same rates. But once the girls get a little older, it just starts to go up and up, right? We see this big gap. And there's pretty good evidence now that part of where that gap comes from is girls' worries about their bodies, right? How their bodies look to other people, how their faces look to other people, their appearance. So it's really this time when body image concerns that could have been a distraction can turn into something much bigger. And I think it's something to really be on the lookout for as parents.
The second most worried about issue in my study of girls, and no, this was not a university study. It was a survey with a handful of interviews and some focus groups with girls for my book Misconnection. Number one was, I wonder if you can guess, what do you think teenage girls' number one issue was?
I'm a little biased, but right, my sense is that one of the biggest issues is body image.
So body image was number two.
Besides that, I would say relationships and parenting.
Relationships with friends, it was. Yeah. I'm worried about my friends and how they see me and whether I've got any. And what was fascinating about that was so many of them linked their relationships with friends to issues with appearance. Mm-hmm. Or, they wanted to be popular, but to be popular, they had to be hot.
Right.
Right. There's this explicit, unmissable link when you look at the comments from girls. It's an undeniable link for so many of them that they literally tie their value as a human being to their physical appearance. And if I look good, then I'm a valuable person. But if I don't look good, I'm worthless. I'm nothing, and nobody will like me.
It would be incredibly hard for them not to tie their value to their appearance because that's what every cultural message they get tells them to do, right? That's what they've been sold since they were young, right? That their prettiness, and then as they get older, their sex appeal, right? That is their source of worth, that will be the ticket to success in life. It will be the ticket to a happy relationship, to good peer experiences, right? This is a lesson that we learn over and over again. It's really hard not to internalize that.
And there's that halo effect where, there's so much research on this. People who are attractive get on average, an easier ride in life. They're more likely to escape speeding tickets when they get pulled over by the police. They're more likely to be marked better in an exam. They get a better ride. There's so many studies in so many different contexts now that highlight that physical appearance actually makes life easier.
I would never underestimate the goods you get in exchange for being sort of consistent with our culture's beauty ideals, right? You get a lot from that. It's not all good though, right? You also get assumptions that you're arrogant or that you're dumb sometimes, right? That you can't be smart and pretty. And I've also talked to a lot of young women who felt like, yeah, it was great to be identified as pretty or beautiful, but over time you start to wonder if that's not all you are. And then I talk to women who are heading into their 30s and 40s who are terrified because they are well aware of the power they got from being beautiful. And they're also aware that it has an expiration date on it. And they head into middle age thinking, what's left, right? Once this goes, what's left?
I remember you shared a quote. You shared a quote from your grandpa.
Oh, yes. I always worry about this because I don't know if he made this up or if he got it somewhere. I couldn't find it online, but he always used to tell me, he called me Nene, and he would say, Nene, never be too proud of your youth or your beauty. You did nothing to earn them and you can do nothing to keep them.
I just love that.
I know it sounds sort of brutal, but I never experienced it that way, right? As a child growing up, like that was his way of telling us that, hey, this game was rigged. Right? You might have gotten some privileges. You might have them now. You're not going to have them forever. And you didn't deserve them. You didn't earn them. Right? Be proud of the things that you work for and build foundations for your life that you can keep. Right? Yeah. That's, I think, the most important lesson there.
It's a little bit of tough love advice, but it's good. I mean, it's really good. What's driving this, though? So can we point the finger at any one main culprit?
So I don't think so. I'm not I'm not interested in sort of bashing any one target here. What I see is this collection of forces, that's created this toxic stew that girls and women are swimming around in. And part of those forces we help along, right? When we buy into the diet industry and the beauty industry, right? When we follow people on Instagram who do nothing but show us how beautiful they are, right? When we encourage this kind of thing sometimes.
You know what? You've just reminded me. I saw a picture of a dinner plate set for sale in a store. I saw I couldn't believe what I was reading. On the plate, there are 3 circles. Okay, so there's like an inner circle drawn on the plate. Then there's a circle halfway along the plate, and then there's a circle towards the outer rim of the plate. And there was a name for each circle. The inner circle, which was, it was representative of the smallest portion size you might put on that plate. The inner circle said skinny jeans. The middle one said favorite jeans. And then the largest circle, which, was out near the rim, taking up the whole plate, said mum jeans.
The way we treat mothers, right? I watched, since we've been sort of in lockdown here, I've been watching maybe a little more Netflix than I should. And I stumbled across this show that it's called The Baker and the Beauty. It was just this little family sitcom. And there's a young woman in it who has this line because she's pressuring her boyfriend to get married. And she said, "I'm a woman. This is what we do. We diet, we get married, we have children, and then we diet again." And I was just, there was just a silly little show, right? But there was something about that line. I was like, yeah, for a lot of women, that's their life, right? You become a mom and then you diet because you're allowed to be a mom, but you're not allowed to look like a mom, right? This pressure to have the body of a 20-year-old for the rest of your life, it's insane, right? It's a pressure that has gotten absolutely worse over the years. There's not great data on it, but I've talked to a lot of practitioners who treat women with eating disorders, and they said they're seeing something kind of unusual, which is like the onset of anorexia showing up in the 30s and 40s. Just not something you typically see. Anorexia can last a very long time, but it tends to start much earlier than that. And some of that is tied to the sense that women are feeling this pressure to do everything they can, right? To not look like someone who would wear mom jeans, right? To have the skinny jeans forever, to get Botox, to get fillers, to color your hair, to go to 10 workout classes a week, to constantly watch what you eat. It's brutal. It's brutal. There's got to be more to life than diet, do some things, and then diet again, right? There just has to be.
Yeah, I'm still curious. I know that I kind of interrupted you when I asked that initial question of what's creating it. What is the culprit? And I know you say there's no one thing. There's this toxic stew, but I wonder if we could actually name them. So we've got dinner plates that reinforce this, and we've obviously got the media and the social media, but are there more insidious things as well? Are there things that we don't even know that are?
Well, there's the beauty industry and the diet industry, which are billions of dollars a year. They're incredibly powerful, and they only make money if you feel unattractive, right? These are products like that you'll only keep buying if they don't work, right? The power of these industries to capitalize on women's vulnerability is really breathtaking. I can't tell you how many smart, educated, with it women will still say things like, "I swear for just a moment I thought that mascara was going to change my life." Right? Like you just really get sold this bill of goods that this next thing is going to make it all okay, right? And that the only way you're ever going to feel like enough is if you can look like a fitness model or look like that influencer on Instagram. It's hard to see several generations of women now never feeling like they're going to be enough, right? That's a really hard thing for me to look at. And it's really hard for me when I find out that even some grown women who are my heroes still feel that way, right? That's a really hard thing to hear. I have people ask all the time, like, where did you find all these women with body image issues to talk to for your book? And I was like, I don't understand the question, right? I just found women. I didn't look for women with body issues. I just found women and I talked to them about their bodies. It's all you need to do.
So young girls, tween girls, teen girls, young women, mums, adult women, retirees I'm guessing that this is just a pervasive thing. And again, just to emphasize, it's not a man thing. In fact, let me read something. I wish I could read your entire book to you so that I could say, now tell me about this. Now, but let me just read this. This was in a chapter that you titled Just Like a Woman. And I've underlined nearly the whole chapter. But I just want to read this bit to you. You said, think about it in this way. If I told you that someone in the United States was about to go under the knife in the hopes of reshaping their appearance, you could bet it was a woman and be correct around 90% of the time. Internationally, 85 to 90% of surgical and non-surgical cosmetic procedures are performed on women. If you heard that a young person was suffering from anorexia or bulimia and guessed it was a young woman, you'd be right 9 times out of 10. Eating disorders and plastic surgery are both complex issues, but we can't ignore gender gaps like these. They force us to acknowledge that men's and women's experience in this culture are vastly different in important ways. Men and women are living systematically different lives when it comes to beauty, sickness. And I just want to read a couple more lines from this particular area. I know it's probably boring to you because you wrote it, but it's so compelling. Women talk about how they look more than men do. They think about how they look more than men do, and they're more likely than men to engage in behaviors to alter or improve their appearance. There's a reason no one in this culture would be surprised to overhear a woman saying, "I feel so fat and ugly today." We accept this type of unhappiness as part of being a woman. Over 30 years ago, researchers coined the phrase normative discontent to describe the phenomenon. The term suggests that we've gotten to a place where it's considered normal for girls or women to be deeply disappointed when they look in the mirror. It's the girl version of boys will be boys.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is the first question I always get, right? If I go speak to any kind of group about this topic, almost always the first question I get is, what about men? What about boys? And so I always want to be clear that boys and men can absolutely have these struggles too, right? They can happen to any gender. So, but that doesn't mean that boys and girls and men and women are living in the same world when it comes to these issues. So
it's different for men.
Yes, it can happen. And I'm not arguing that it's easy to be a man either, right? I think there are pressures that hit men differentially. So for example, the pressure to make a lot of money, to be powerful, to have high status, right? That is a pressure, a burden that men bear much, much more than women do, right? I think in some ways women are given more freedom in those respects. But I don't think we can argue that men and women are facing the same reality when it comes to appearance focus. But part of the issue is I study women and girls. That's what I do, right? So that is my focus. There are people who focus on body image and men and boys who are doing excellent work. So I don't mean to imply that that's not important and not out there. But what fascinates me is, as a culture, this set of rules that women are just by and large expected to follow without question that we would never ask men to follow. Can you imagine if we asked men to wear high heels? Or something equally uncomfortable and, inefficient when it came to walking.
Or even to remove the hair from their bodies.
Yeah, and people say, well, some men wax. And I say, absolutely, right? But if you look at waxing salons, they'll say, here's our waxing menu. And then there'll be a little part that says men's services, right? So they're even telling you there's a differentiation there. It's not the norm for men the way it is for women, at least not for straight guys, right? I do think that sexual minority men face a greater degree of pressure on this front. But it's everywhere built into our culture, right? You hear it from the minute we start talking about infants, when we say, such a pretty girl. Oh, look at the strong boy, right? It starts very young that we think about women's bodies, about their physicality as existing to be looked at, right? Instead of as existing to do things.
I just remembered a story. One of the guys that is a TV host for one of our major breakfast programs nationwide around Australia, his name is Carl Stefanovic. And a few years ago, there was a big media storm when he stepped forward and said, guess what? I haven't changed my suit for a year. I've worn the same suit and tie every single day on the television for an entire year, and nobody's noticed. I've not received one single email. I've not received one single comment on social media. Nobody's said a word about the fact that I've been wearing exactly the same suit and tie and the white shirt for a year. But he stepped out and said it that day because that same day his co-host, who at the time was a lady called Lisa Wilkinson, that day she had been absolutely slammed with hundreds of comments because people didn't like the clothing that she wore on the television that day. And this was a regular occurrence. This happens all the time. Because I'm on the TV, I'm following a bunch of Instagram accounts for the TV hosts that I'm interviewed by or that I work with from time to time. And whenever they post any pictures of them, the threads are full of comment after comment after comment of how beautiful they are. Now, they're not posting anything about their looks. They're not trying to look snazzy. They're simply saying, I'm here doing this gig, or I'm at home with the kids, or here's what I cooked for dinner. And nevertheless, all the comments are about their physical appearance. It's almost like people feel compelled to say something they don't know what to say, and so they comment on their looks. But I can tell you, I've never posted a picture on my Instagram or on my Facebook where people have chosen to make the majority of the commentary about my physical appearance. It never happened. I mean, I know that I'm not the most attractive guy in the world, but it's never, ever happened. And I don't care that I'm not the most attractive guy in the world. I don't have to be Brad Pitt. People don't value me for my appearance. They value me for the work that I do.
It's a super awkward place to be. I have to tell you, I can go somewhere to do a TV segment or give a talk on this topic. And often the first thing people will say to me is something about how I look, right? Even in that moment, right? It still happens. I have an author Instagram account, which I'm not particularly good at. I don't know how to do stories, et cetera, et cetera. But I almost never post a picture of myself. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in people's commentary. I'm not interested in those moments where I have to worry about how I look as I'm taking that picture and what's my hair doing and should I filter it or should I not filter it? I just don't do it, right? But that's a power I have to be able to opt out. There are many people in jobs that can't opt out, right? Like a woman working in news. It's an image-focused profession. There's a journalist, I wrote about her a little bit in Beauty Sick, Heidi Stevens of the Chicago Tribune locally, who's got very curly hair. Like that's it. It's just curly hair. And she could write a column every year with a collection of literal hate mail she gets about her hair. Right? Like, how can you leave your hair like that? Your hair is a rat's nest. How could you do that? That's so unprofessional. And she's not even on TV. This is all just based on that little thumbnail picture that you see next to a columnist.
Wow.
So just imagine how that gets turned up, right? And when you're a woman in the public eye, and I have to wonder all the time, how many women would seek out jobs, careers, volunteer opportunities in the public eye, but choose not to because they don't want that kind of scrutiny about their appearance. Right? I think that's happening more than we talk about.
And your research shows that the cost to women in terms of opportunity, which is what you've just described, is huge. But it's not just that cost, it's the cost in terms of the time. When I've got to go and do a TV spot, I walk in, they throw a little bit of makeup-y sort of stuff on my face. It takes about a minute and a half. Yeah, they go dop, dop, dop. I don't know what it is, but they put some stuff on my face, which I remove as soon as I'm off the TV. I get those facial wipes and get rid of it. But I'm in and out within about a minute and a half. They have a look at my hair and say, "Oh, that's fine." They don't even sit me in the chair. Whereas the women who I'm often appearing on the television with, they'll have to be there at least an hour ahead of the segment. I stroll in 15 minutes before the segment. I'm in, I'm out, I'm done. They're there at least an hour before. They're getting their hair done. They're spending all that time that they could be reading a book, or that time that they could be responding to email, or that time that they could be building their strategic plan for their business. And it's all of that money that they've got to spend. I don't spend money on my appearance, but women are expected to spend money on the mascara that's going to change their life that you mentioned before.
Just the basics, just the basic grooming. Now you're supposed to get eyelashes glued onto your eyelashes once a month so that it can save you time and not having to wear mascara. I used to get my nails done. And not only did I get my nails done, but I got them done like clear. So it wasn't, I'm spending this time and money. It's not even a color. So it'd be pretty low maintenance then. And my feet too. And I enjoyed it. I found it's like, I know it's such a privilege to be able to go do something like that, but it's super relaxing. But I found that it got to this point where I would think like, oh no, I gotta it's been 3 weeks. I gotta get my nails done. And it started to feel like this burden. And I thought, well, what would happen if I just stopped? And you know what happened? It felt weird for a few weeks. I learned, like any reasonable human can, how to file my own nails. And it's one less thing I have to worry about now.
And typing must be so much easier.
It's just It's nice, right? It's nothing.
Yeah.
Now, a pedicure still feels good. I won't lie.
But the point is, you're doing it because it feels good. You're not doing it to impress somebody. So let's move towards the final part of this conversation. It's been so compelling to talk with you about this, but I really want to talk about what we can do to help our children, both boys and girls, to get past this awful belief that ties self-worth to appearance. I loved your suggestions in Beauty Sick. You've got the back end of the book is full of suggestions, and something that you did was so consistent with what I've read in the research and what I've understood, and that is there's very little point talking to our kids about how everything's photoshopped and saying, don't believe what you see because it's all photoshopped, because to them, whether it's fake or not, and whether they know it's fake or not, doesn't stop it being aspirational. You're still focusing on the appearance, even if you're saying, look at everything and be critical of it and highlight, where the airbrushing's happened or the $40,000 that they've spent on camera and lighting and equipment and people. It's still in front of them. It's still being noticed. Mm-hmm. So let's start with our little ones, our 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds. What can parents do to reduce the likelihood that they're going to be beauty focused?
So the thing I love to say is that there are actually a few pretty easy things you can do that don't cost money, and they just take some practice. And one of them is I encourage parents to consider making their home an appearance commentary free zone, right? Where you don't talk about the shape of other people's bodies or who's gained or lost weight or who's ugly or pretty. And that means you, that means people on TV, that means peers, that means even people you don't like. Right? Even the politician you don't like, it means, body shame that person either. And so you just give this continuous gentle message that we leave space for other conversations in this house. That's not how we think about people. We don't think about them in terms of whether they're beautiful or not. Now, I do think you need to be careful there. You don't want to move so far as to say how you look doesn't matter, right? Racism is real. Anti-fat bias is real, right? Like all of these things can still be wrestled with, but it means that you don't send the message to your children that a part of what determines if they're good or not is whether they are appealing to look at. So just practice it, right? And if you have guests to your home and they start saying like, oh, did you see so-and-so lost weight? Just say, oh, we're working really hard not to talk about those things so much in this house. Do you mind if we change the subject? Right? It's a pretty easy thing to do. And I love thinking about all the conversations that are going to happen instead, right? To me, that's so fun, right? So that means as a parent, you have to stop body shaming yourself. And that's
such a big one, isn't it? As a parent, how do we make sure that the comments that we make about our own bodies, if we're going to make them at all, which so many of us do, how do we make sure that those comments are either positive or uplifting or focused? Something that you emphasized in your book that I've adopted immediately, I thought this is so perfect, is when we're going to talk about our bodies, we don't talk about how they look, we talk about what they do.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think especially for young children, because they're learning to use their bodies, right? So encourage them to think about their bodies, not from this objectified perspective, not from how do they look to other people, but from the perspective of what do they do for you? What do they allow you to experience? What do they allow you to feel? I've had some people say to me, oh, that's ableist, right? Because what if you're disabled? But I don't mean that you have to be a marathon runner to appreciate what your body does. Like our bodies do all kinds of things, right? They allow for creativity and communication. They allow us to connect with other people. If you have children who are into athletics of any kind, right? They allow that sort of thing. Bodies are super cool. Right. So teach your children about how cool they are, like all the amazing things they can do and how they can care for their bodies so that they can keep doing cool things, but not so that they can look good to other people. Right. The best advice is to just keep those conversations off the table. I just don't have them.
If you were to extend that developmental trajectory from our younger children into the older children, everything that you've just said would obviously apply. Is there anything additional that you would add to what parents can be doing to reduce the focus on appearance with their tweens and teens?
It's going to get really hard in those tween years. Right. And I think you have to be very careful as a parent not to, here's a psychological term you've probably come across a lot in your work on parenting is reactance, right? Like the minute you tell a child, don't do that thing, they're going to want it more. And so I think you have to step away from that temptation to say like, you're being vain, you're being superficial. Don't follow that Instagram account. Don't post selfies. Don't do that, right? You can't really do that. You have to give children some space to experiment. But I think one of the best gifts you can give your child as they move into those years, no matter what their gender is room to explore all the different parts of themselves, right? So ask them questions about what matters to them, what's inspiring to them, what they're worried about lately, what they're thinking about. I don't think we ask our children enough questions as they get to that age. A lot of children that age are quite willing to talk if you ask the right question and if you show that you're willing to listen, right? And not butt in and tell them they're wrong and try to redirect them. And I think giving tween girls the space to be something other than beauty queens or other than people who are constantly worried about the fact that they're not beauty queens is one of the best things you can do. So help them develop their interests, help them develop their passions. And then when they move into the teen years, here's maybe going to sound like insane advice, but I told you I love teenagers, and I do. If your daughters in particular are struggling with these issues, it's time to get them angry, right? It's time to talk with them about what a sick injustice this world does to girls and women when it makes girls and women hate their bodies, right? It's time to ask them questions about who benefits from that hatred, who's making money off of it, right? Whose life gets better when you don't like your body and whose life gets worse. And what does that mean, right? Teenagers, as you know, are quite angry sometimes. So to me, that's an opportunity, right? Harness that anger, right? Let them see the ways that they don't like what the world is doing and set them on the path to making a better world, right? Teenagers are ready to make a difference. I think we see this all around us right now. We see teenagers doing amazing work, quite frankly, that we should have done, right? And now they're taking it upon themselves. And so I think you can really give space for your teenagers to turn some of that sadness and that despondency into appropriately targeted anger, right? Give them a passion, give them a cause, let them, make their mark on the world. I think they're way more ready to do that than we give them credit for.
Great answers. Something that stands out to me from the earlier part of what you were saying is just, if I was to restate it, I guess, and re-emphasize a little bit of it, what I'm actually hearing you say is make their world and their lives so full that they don't have the time or the space to be worried about how they look. And that doesn't mean overcram their curriculum and their schedule. No. but it means give them the capacity to be developing other things, other talents, other strengths, other capacities, so that they're not sitting there staring at their image in Instagram and trying to make it look that little bit better.
Many years ago, so sorry I interrupted you there, but many years ago I tried to do a study of young women who weren't hurting in this way, like who felt pretty good about their bodies and weren't engaging in eating disordered behaviors. And we found this very tiny group of them. And we just did this basic interview about like, what did your parents do growing up and how did this happen? And what they told us is that it was nothing magic, right? Like, yeah, they were probably a little more likely to have these sort of like feminist leaning parents who were like trying to do some of this deliberately. But mostly what they said is it's just not something we focused on in my family. We focused on other things.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the key.
A friend of mine, Rebecca Sparrow, she has a great following here in Australia. And one of the things that she emphasizes is with your tween and teen girls, go through their Instagram accounts with them. Go through the people that they're following and get rid of all of the people who are focused on fashion and appearance, and instead fill up your feed with artists and poets and influencers and people who can offer something other than a view of appearance. And it's such a simple thing to do, and I wonder how often we've done it. Okay, the big question. Yeah. We've talked about little ones. We've talked about our tweens and teens. But what about the mum who's listening right now, or her husband or partner, who is saying, this has been my life? How does she get past this, and how does she make sure that she doesn't pass it on to her kids? And how does a husband or partner support her as she tries to get past it?
So I've talked to so many women who they kind of come to this topic a little late, and they realize I've struggled with this my whole life and I didn't mean to, but I passed these struggles on to my daughter, and it's too late and I blew it. And my message is always like, it is not too late, right? If you have a tween or a teen or a young adult, or even an adult daughter, it is not too late. And there is something, I think, just really beautiful about sitting down with your daughter and saying, I realize that these are the messages I've been sending to you, right? That I haven't been happy with my body. And these are the ways it came out. And these are the ways it might have affected you. And I wonder if you want to work together with me to change that. Like, here's some things I'm going to try to do differently now. I wonder what you would think about that. A lot of the daughters I know would just start sobbing with relief, right? They would so appreciate that kind of raw honesty. It's not too late, right? It's never too late. And if your concerns are severe, right? If they're really affecting your well-being, your mental health, then I would also say seek some help, right? If part of how they're influencing your children is because the intensity of those negative emotions is so big that it's leaking out, right? Then get some professional support in there, right? So that you can learn how to, heal yourself up a little and then create a better world for your children too. But it's not too late, right? Even if you have adult children, it's not too late. And it's not too late to call your friends out either. To say, like, I want to do things differently. I don't want the first 20 minutes of every conversation we have to be about weight gain or loss. I just don't want to do that anymore. I have a friend who, she's a junior high teacher. And she said she'll have these meetings with other teachers on Zoom, like we're doing now. And at the first few minutes, they all fuss with, like, oh, do I have a double chin showing? I haven't been able to color my gray. That it's like this intro right, to their meeting. It's okay to just say no to that. To say, like, no, I've decided I want a different psychological climate for myself. And it's going to start with me creating it and with me inviting the people I love to create it with me, where we're just not going to spend so much time on this. There's so many other cool things to spend your time on and your energy on.
Renee, this has just been such a brilliant conversation. I've been.
I fear I've gone into lecture mode, which is my my number one mode.
I've been as absorbed in this conversation as I was with your book. The book is called Beauty Sick: How the Cultural Obsession with Appearance Hurts Girls and Women. It is literally one of the best books I've read in years. It's definitely in my top 5 over the last handful of years, and I just loved it. I can't recommend it enough. Before we wrap up, can I ask you a couple of quick questions about that niece and nephew of yours? Mm-hmm. Okay, because I always love to ask a handful of questions at the end of every podcast. Everyone gets the same ones, rapid fire questions, just about what it's like to have little ones in our midst. So if we asked your niece and nephew their favorite thing to do with the coolest auntie ever, what would they say?
Ooh, so my niece, who's around 4, she's super into crafts. And so actually for Christmas, I got her this giant bin full of craft supplies. And that is something she loves right now. And I can't wait till our pandemic lockdown is over and she and I can make some mess with paints. And then I really miss my he's just under 2, my nephew. I miss him so much because one of my favorite things to do with him is have him cuddle up next to me on the couch and read a book to him. And then when you finish the book, he scooches down, goes and gets another book, brings it back, gets back up. And I miss that. I miss those moments with him. So I can't wait to do those things again.
Beautiful. Thank you. What's been your trickiest, and I don't know if you would have had too many with the kids being so young, but what's been your trickiest auntie moment?
Oh, I will say that I made a pledge never to talk to my niece about her appearance, that I'm just not going to do it. Figure I'll leave that to other people in her life and I'll be a different place for her. But she is into Disney princess culture. And it is very hard for me to sort of maintain an openness around that when I really don't like it. Right? I really don't like those elements of the culture. And when she's very excited and wants to talk to me about her new princess thing and her pink tiara and all of those things, I really struggle with that.
Okay, last question for you. If you could spend an hour with this little niece and nephew at any age at all, let's say that isolation finishes and tomorrow afternoon at 3:00 they're coming over to spend some time with you and they're walking into your living room at whatever age you can choose, what age would you pick and why?
Oh, I can't wait until they're, like 12, 13. I know this sounds bizarre, but I love kids once they get some angst, right? Once they're a little angry and have that intensity. And to me, that's such a cool window into the adults they're going to become and into what they're going to care about and what they're passions are. I can't wait until they get a little adolescent moody. That's the age I'm interested in. Yeah.
And that's when parents say, Auntie, you are the best. Please take them for a week, 2 weeks, a year.
Yes. My brother jokes that I will be able to adopt them at that time.
Absolutely perfect. Well, Renee, if people want to know more about you and your book, Beauty Sick, where can they go to get more information about this incredibly important and really, really smart work that you've been doing?
Thank you so much for the kind words. People can go to beautysick.com, or if you're interested more in the academic research side of things, my lab has a website as well, which is bodyandmedia.com. And if you're into Instagram, it's beauty_sick.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me and with our audience. You've been wonderfully generous and shared so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you've gotten some insight into Dr. Renee Engeln as a result of this Parenting in Perspective podcast. I love the quote from Renee's grandfather that she mentioned earlier in the podcast. Here it is again. Don't be too proud of your youth or your beauty. You did nothing to earn them, and you can do nothing to keep them. Isn't that great? Well, join me next time as I talk with Ethan Kross. He's a professor at the University of Michigan, and we're going to talk about controlling our emotions and self-control.
When I use the term self-control, I mean, how can people align their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors with their goals? So it's really broad. It's really like, if you want to act or think or feel a particular way in this world, how can you do that? What are the psychological tools that allow you to fulfill those goals?
That's Professor Ethan Kross. He's a professor at psychology at the University of Michigan. He was actually involved in the marshmallow experiments. Well, actually, not those ones, but his PhD supervisor was the guy, Walter Mischel, and he'll be my next guest on the Parenting in Perspective podcast. Oh, as well, just before we wrap this up, I really want to say thank you so very much to Dee Stewart, who left a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts about the podcast. Dee Stewart said, "Fantastic parenting perspective. As the father of 5 young children, this podcast is fast becoming one of my top played podcasts. It's very insightful, entertaining, and helpful in parenting perspectives. Highly recommend." So thank you very much, Dee Stewart, for diving in there and leaving that review for me. It's those reviews that help other people to find out all about the podcast and build their families into happier families where their kids can thrive and flourish. And please make sure that you tell your friends. We want to get the word out. If you'd like more info about how I can help your family to thrive and flourish, especially if you'd like to have that ongoing monthly support for as little as $2.50 a week via our amazing Happy Families memberships, please visit happyfamilies.com.au. We're having more and more people join the family every day. It's getting bigger and more exciting, and we're just doing so many great things in that membership. It would be great to have you there. If you want more info, visit my Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families, or happyfamilies.com.au. And as always, thank you very much to Justin Roiland for his work in producing the podcast, making it sound absolutely fabulous. And thank you for listening to Parenting in Perspective, a Happy Families podcast.